start a recording, and as people drift in, if they can just pick up as we roll along. So I'd like to start off. I mean, these conversations tend to be fairly informal, and I think we all know Jack. He's written a ton. He's written prolifically. He's been around the principles for 30 years now, Jack. Is that right? 30 plus?
No, 30 minus.
30 minus. So longer than most of us have, I suspect. We were just talking a little bit about a retreat to Peru that Jack did. And I know that there's a mentorship program coming up. And maybe if we can save some time at the end, you can give us a couple of details on that. I know it's 10 months long. So let's get started. I want to say that this book, in my opinion, is among the best books, the best principle books I've read. And I've read a number now. And I think it is right up near one of your best works, Jack. The way, to me, it's almost two books in one. You know, the case studies and the way those case studies express themselves, and then the second half of the book is like a how-to guide. I just thought, I thought it was amazing. So let's start off with what would you, with all the writing that you've done and all the teaching that you've done, Jack, what would you like people to take away from your body of work?
As I'm retiring.
Exactly.
From the whole body of work?
Yeah, what would you like people to take away? Arvin's laughing.
Well, I'd like people, oddly, to take away that there's hope for all. When people are stuck, when they're in the depths of despair, when they're in circumstances that most of us would say are really extremely difficult, and it's hard to see your way out, and you know that there always is hope, and there's always hope for two reasons. One, thinking changes. And I would add to that, as Sid always used to say, we're only one thought away from, what he meant was, from getting a new insight that changes everything for us. And the other hope is that we already are that perfect spiritual essence that's inside of us, connected to the oneness of all things. And no matter how crazy our thinking gets, nothing can destroy or harm that. So at any moment, everyone is able to drop away from their thinking, and they automatically drop into the place that they never left. that who they really are, that never really left them. It just gets covered up. So those things are the hope for everybody, no matter what their circumstances.
Yeah, well said, Jack. So I made a few notes, and we'll see. I'm going to ask a question or two more, and then I think we'll open it up to questions. Looking at the case studies, they are, a lot of people use case studies to illustrate the principles, or to present the principles. And these ones, to me, felt like they were more raw, they were more gritty than most of the other ones that I've met. There was a realism to them that I found quite touching. What is it that you think enabled people in those circumstances to have the monumental shifts that they did? Is there, if there's a common thread there, what would it be?
The common thread is that is that sometimes, in spite of themselves, they woke up to a new way of being because they had a new way of seeing. You think about going through your life, and this is true for everybody. We go through our lives and we look out of whatever level of consciousness we happen to be on, and we call that reality. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, something huge shifts inside people, and they're looking from a different, higher level of consciousness. And then what they saw as reality before, they are looking back at and saying, wait a minute, I thought that was reality then, but that wasn't reality at all. Now, maybe this isn't reality either, but it gives us more perspective on this reality for sure.
So it's I was just going to add there. It's almost like you're shifting from a reality that may not be reality that's better than the one that wasn't reality either.
Well, it feels better up there. That's the thing.
Right.
Every time we get closer to peace of mind, love, wisdom, it just feels better. Compared to anger, despair, depression, anxiety, all those kinds of things. It shows, and like what people don't often realize is that in every circumstance, in every situation, there are all those levels of consciousness are automatically built into it. Like they're automatically there. We're not seeing them. We're only seeing one. That's the level we're looking out of.
Right.
But in that moment that one can see even the possibility of all levels, in that moment, we're free from the level that we're looking out of. And that's what happened to them. It happened to me too.
So the simple fact that we become aware that there can be an alternative is freeing.
Seeing the possibility,
right,
is freeing. Seeing the possibility allows us to be unstuck from where we're stuck. Because before, we're not seeing any possibilities. We're just seeing, there's a lot of people that go through life in despair. They don't see any other possibilities for themselves in the moment. And I've had my moments, where I felt despair. And it's just hard to see any other possibilities there. But as soon as you clue into the idea, whoa, there are all these other possibilities that already exist. That's the thing. They already exist. And we can drop into them. The danger is to try to think yourself there. Try to think yourself to a different level. Because if we try to do that, we're thinking from the same level that we were at, and it doesn't work.
Right.
But just it's almost like falling out of the level that we're at into the hands of all possibilities.
Wow. I like that.
I never expressed it that way before, but I kind of like that.
Yeah, I like that as well. Well, we're recording, so we've got it forever. Why do you think Roger Mills had so much success when others failed? And not, maybe failed is not the right word, but why did he have that success?
Number one, his absolute undying certainty. He knew how he changed. Like he really changed as a result of talking to Sid, or listening to Sid, I should say. or hearing Sid, you know. And he knew.
Jack, sorry, just one second. Can we get everyone to mute themselves, please? And maybe hold on. Can I mute? I can mute all, and then you want to unmute Jack. Can you just say a few words? Oh, hold on a sec. You're muted now.
That's what I just said. You've muted me now,
Yeah,
but nobody could hear me because I was muted.
And then I tried to unmute you. Okay, we've got it. We'll make do.
Yeah. Where was I? Oh, Roger.
There we go.
Yeah. So he knew how he changed, and he knew that it was universal, so that everybody could change. So it didn't matter to him. It didn't matter to him what kinds of craziness were going on in these communities that he went into. He was actually, you know, I always thought it was unbelievably courageous, but he was just oblivious to any of the danger.
I remember reading about that in Rogers. I don't have it here. It's his green book, and he talks about someone is talking about him going up to people on street corners, like dealers, and you know, just without any cause or any concern at all. So I guess that certainty is where that his ability to do that came from.
Yeah. Plus, not just the certainty. And this is a lesson for all of us. No matter what craziness was going on in their lives, or no matter how badly they were treating him, he saw straight through it to their health.
Right.
And he had this idea of course they're going to be treating me that way, given the fact that they're thinking that way.
Right.
Of course. Therefore, it didn't have anything to do with him. Like he wasn't going to take that personally, because he was just seeing that that's what happens when people think that way, and they think that's all there is.
Right. So knowing that freed him to be himself when he was approaching these people.
He could be himself totally, because he was no longer self-conscious like that. Like he didn't, this is a weird thing to say, but he didn't bring himself into the housing projects.
Right. Well, that's
he didn't bring his ego into the housing projects. If he did, he would have failed.
Well, that resonates a lot, and certainly in the teachings that I've heard from you about, you know, being an empty vessel and not carrying the ego with you in conversation. It's fascinating.
And it's even beyond that. It's not carrying the ego with you no matter what happens.
Right.
Like no matter what happens. You know, all we can do in going into a community or an organization or whatever is our best. That's it. That's all we can do is our best.
Yeah, and I guess as long as we, or when we can see that other people are also doing their best, there's an equalizing aspect to that.
That's true. Absolutely.
Listen, let me, I got one more question. These are flowing really nicely, actually. And then we'll take some questions. What, for people, I'm going to assume that everyone in this call has on some level or another been touched by their principles or has uncovered them in their own way. What advice would you give, Jack, to people that are out there that have been touched, have had their lives changed, and now want to go out and share?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't give advice.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. Very, very poor choice of words. Yeah.
But I would say, Sid, from the very beginning, he knew that the best way to learn this for oneself would be to give it away to others.
Right.
To be of service. Now, if we have it in our minds that we want to be of service, and it doesn't really matter how much we flounder around in attempting to be that for other people, because all we're attempting to do is being that for other people. It's when people start getting into this ego thinking about, people are paying me, I'd better deliver, and they start getting insecure about that, or they get thoughts like, how much money should I charge, or all that is extraneous to being of service. And when we have being of service in our minds, the rest of it takes care of itself. It just kind of falls into place.
Yeah, that's certainly been my experience over the last, I don't know, say the last year, where I've been coaching or sharing a little bit more. And the more that I can be of the more that I find myself being of service, the less I'm worried about dollars and cents. Like none of that all just takes care of itself, exactly as you said. It just flows.
Yeah, and the notion of being of service is really pure, you could say. And so whatever it is that we have to offer, when we're of service, we just offer whatever we can see that hopefully out of our listening to them, hopefully out of seeing, realizing what worked for Roger Mills. And that's actually how I came up with these four, there's no good word for them, but components or whatever to the helping process, because Roger went in his health. He went in living through the eyes of the principles for himself. So that's like essential for us. He went in knowing that people's minds were going to be like scrambled, or have all this kind of thinking. So the idea is, how can you get their thinking to relax? So he would have fun with them. How do the fun equals relaxed thinking? The kinds of things that we hold on our mind just tend to break up a little bit. They loosen their grip. He went in listening to people, really listening to them deeply. That's what we want to do. And he only talked about the principles in the way that came out of his listening, and so that where they could hear it. That's like starting where people are at.
Right. So there was, sorry.
If people like were concerned about their kids, not being able to get a handle on their kids' behaviors or something like that, that's where you start with them. And you just see them with love, and you see them with, your heart goes out to them because they have ways of thinking that are keeping them stuck, and so do their kids, and when we're just of service, we can give ourselves up to them, you could say. And then it all unfolds in a natural way.
Wow. Well said, Jack. Well said. That might be a really good moment to open it up to questions. So it's we've got about 16 people on the call. If you want to, if you go to the participants button or click on participants, there's a spot where you can raise your hand. Alternatively, if we exercise a little self-control, we can probably just start talking and figure it out as well.
Or you can literally raise your hand and we'll...
Or you can, yeah, exactly.
You can't figure any of that out, which I wouldn't be able to do.
Right. Okay. Well, so okay, hold on. Let me...
apparently Dominic is not able to figure it out because he's just...
I see you, Dominic. Hold on. Let me unmute you. Oops, hold on a sec. There you go, Dominic. It's all... Oops. There you go. It's all yours.
Whoops. You muted him again.
There we go. Got it. Thanks, Jack. All right, Dominic.
All right. Hey, Jack. Great to see you again.
Hey, Dominic. Good to see you too.
I must say this book really was amazing for me, and I would never have picked up this book had it not been for the book club, because just the context of what the book was and what it was about. It wasn't one of the books that I was going to pick up. So, and in fact, I'd say I was kind of disappointed it got put on because it wasn't one that I wanted to read. And so then I read it because of the book club. Well, right from the beginning, it just grabbed me. I had never, like the depth of the cases, like the people that you interviewed. I mean, in most books, you just can't have that level of depth the way you put in those chapters. So, I mean, it just went beyond, anything else that I'd kind of read. So to sort of be able to learn that was incredible. And so, yeah, just the amount of learning that was happening out of that. And seeing those real examples. And then the second part of the book was such a great surprise and a bonus for me because I wasn't expecting that at all either. Like where, these components were highlighted that I particularly valued because it was based on your experience, but also based on the experience of others who had actually done this work. And, just, I'll put it in my words, is kind of in your reflecting about what is it that made it work? Like, what were qualities or things to pay attention to that made it work? I found that incredibly helpful. And just from a coaching perspective, because I'm a coach, and so it kind of fits into my lens of that. And I could really see the resonance of it. But anyway, so thank you for this book. It really is. I've come to appreciate not only your books, but the things that you've been involved with in our community, like the stuff that Linda Kearing and getting that history and like sort of capturing some of the beginning part. It's incredible. And yeah.
I seem to have had my fingers in a lot of pies. And
you do. You've got your fingers in a lot of pies. And then there's this characteristic that you bring, which I really have come to appreciate. The most recent that I had no idea about was that document that, the early practitioners, the early teachers kind of.
Paradigm shift.
Yes.
The white paper.
Oh, the white
paper.
Mm-hmm.
And, Elsie and George kind of wrote that thing, but they acknowledge in there, this was your idea. And to sort of create this thing of all those teachers that learned from Sid. And again, when I didn't know that, I had seen that paper before and I kind of had read through, but I missed that part. And so then next time I read it and I saw that it said Jack, I go, well, of course Jack would be. This is, of course, something Jack would be behind. So I just love the value that you bring in that regard. What had me pop up my hand was when you were talking about service and you said, it's about being of service. My mind went into two different places. And one of them was around, as a coach, we're supposed to, like, in coach training and stuff, is like you be of service. You're in a coaching conversation really looking for what the other person wants. So there's a consistency to that. I got that part, being of service. But then I was thinking, like, when you were describing Roger and what was going on, is there was this documentary I watched on Netflix about there's this black man in the South who kind of joined or got involved with the KKK. I don't know if you know that whole story.
Yeah, you mean the movie?
Yeah, there's a movie, but
Yeah.
no, but it's a documentary. So
Okay.
This guy, so he's a black man, and he couldn't understand how people could hate him when they didn't even know him. So he kind of got curious about the KKK, and he would go around and kind of befriend people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said this thing of service, so since then, by the way, his results, when you watch the documentary, many of those KKK people left the Klan, and they gave him their, cloaks and all that stuff. So he almost has them like trophies of the ones. But when he talked about service, one of the ways he got started, and as you said this, my mind went immediately there, is that a group of these Klansmen that he had befriended, they were wanting to go to a rally of the Klan somewhere, and they needed to rent a van, and none of the car rental companies were willing to do it because they thought it would get damaged or whatever, given what they're involved with. So this guy, to be of service, says, well, I got a van, I can drive you down there myself. And I just thought, now that really is just looking to be of service with no agenda.
Right, no agenda. Yeah.
So, and of course that led to things. Obviously it led to conversation.
Yeah.
Obviously it led to people getting to know each other. And like, who would have thought, right? Who would ever believe that could be the way to be in with that and the way to influence something there?
Yeah, it's a great example of thinking changing, even when it looks intractable.
Right.
So thanks.
So you got to trust.
Yeah.
Like, you got to trust in being of service, even when you can't see how that would actually help or lead to something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great point. Great point. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thanks, Dominic. Jesse Lynn. Hold on. Can you, here, I'll get you. There you go, Jesse. No? Hold on.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jesse.
So I'm going to echo Michael and Dominic's words about the book. It blew me away. I just, it wasn't what I was expecting. And just from the beginning of it throughout, like, I loved the case studies. I loved how you could I could hear the people, I had this vision of the people just from the way that it was written, and it was written so verbatim as well. So I thought that was amazing. I loved the second part too, because I was disappointed when the part one ended. I was like, oh, and then I was just like, but then part two started. I'm like, oh, this is cool. But in part two, when you had that conversation with, I think his name was Khalil.
Yes, I remember that well.
So what I loved in that was that when you went home that night, you saw something, and you went back the next day and you had another conversation. How was that received by Khalil and the rest of the people?
Beautifully. And I knew it would be, because it was a new insight from me. So I brought it in, and I was coming from my heart about it. And what I've noticed is, whenever we come from our heart, it's usually experienced very well. The only time it wouldn't be is if other people have other thinking that prevents them from taking it in pure. But most people can tell, when you're coming from your heart, they can tell. And by the same token, people can tell when we're talking from our intellect or something like that.
Did Khalil see something different the day after you kind of told him about your insights?
Did he see something different? Yeah, I think, it was a long time ago. So, all I really could remember of it is what's written there.
Yeah.
But I remember his whole demeanor changed, and that means something.
Yeah. Because it was such an amazing insight that you had, like it was one of these things, because when I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is like, wow, so I can just imagine being in that moment and being in that conversation must have been really powerful.
It really helps to be humble.
Yeah.
Like if we have a new insight that makes us think, wait a minute here, the way that I've been going about this is just totally off. Or wait a minute, I thought I was listening, but I'm not listening at all. I haven't been listening at all. You get an insight like that, and it's like, whoa. And as long as people are real, with what they're bringing to the table, way more often than not, it's going to be heard and felt, and people are going to respond.
I thought one of the questions that you asked, kind of on that kind of going vertical versus horizontal, when you said like what bothers you about that or something, I can't remember the exact words. I thought that was really a great question as well, because it's so simple, but it really does kind of scratch the surface and open up a little window for opportunity for kind of digging deeper.
Well, it's interesting because that question just came to me in the moment. I didn't plan on asking it. And the reason it came to me is because I think I've started to get used to seeing things on a vertical level. When we see things at a horizontal level, just in case people have no idea what we're talking about, if people see things on a horizontal level, okay, so we're looking out of a certain level of consciousness. And, we think about what can be done at that level. And anything you come up with, like you can talk about the history of how you got there. You can talk about what you're planning to do afterwards. You can talk about how you're feeling when you're there, the kinds of thoughts that you have when you're there. All of that is from the same level of consciousness. It's kind of like on a horizontal plane. The idea is to help people take a step back from that so that they can see a different plane. Like there's always a different plane. And when we're on a different plane, things just look different. So what questions can we come up with that help people call what they're saying is reality into question? That's what if I'm coaching somebody or working in a community or working in an organization, if I can, first of all, it's like something's puzzling me about what they're saying. So I want to get them puzzled about themselves. So it's something that doesn't compute. So if they can get puzzled about themselves and call their own reality into question, that's when we I think tend to make progress with people.
It's wonderful, Jack. Jesse, you stole my direction there. Well done. I was just going to ask Jack to expand a little bit on that horizontal and vertical approach. There's something that struck me, Jack, and you address it in the book, and it's in the second half. It's from 186, and you address it later, and I can't see where, but or maybe it's just above. What we're listening for is the fundamental assumption that keeps them stuck or in bad habits. With a clear mind, we might realize, oh, I see what they don't understand. I see what they're missing. On the surface, this may sound like a contradiction. Aren't you holding something on your mind by trying to find the assumption? But it is not. All we are doing is setting an intention to see it, then taking it off our minds and forgetting about it. Can you talk a little bit about setting that intention and then forgetting about it? Like what does that encompass?
Yeah, like I do this a lot in my life whenever I come upon a problem. So the solution is not apparent to me. Yeah, I've got a problem, the solution is not apparent. So I will ask of universal mind, or people can ask whoever they want to ask. And I'll say something like, I would like to see my way through this, or I would like to see, what the best approach would be in this situation, or I would like to see, I'd like to get an answer to this, or something like that. So that sets our intention.
Right.
And then I know that if my mind is still in, if I'm still experiencing the problem by keeping it on my mind, then I'm not going to be able to hear anything new, because my mind, the way that it is not going to allow anything in. So that's why I want to forget about it. So I might take a walk. I mean, that's just me.
Right.
I might take a walk. So I've set the intention, take a walk, and just get into, clue into nature or whatever's going on around me. And at some point when my mind relaxes, I usually hear something that I hadn't seen before.
So it's not the walk in nature or the reading a book that is actually enabling. It's the changing of the thought that's enabling.
Well, it's the mind calming down so that we
Right.
can hear new thought
Right.
at a different level. So that we can have new insight. That's what happens. And it just so happens that when I go for a walk, if I'm not listening to music, which I do quite a bit, and I just get into the sounds of nature and I allow my mind to relax, then more often than not, something will come to me.
Right.
And if it doesn't, it just means my head hasn't gotten clear enough yet.
How do you think, Jack, that we can help people to become clear enough to allow insight, or can we?
Well, there's certainly, everybody's got their own way for their mind to calm down or their head to clear. And, there's nothing that I could say that can help somebody's mind clear. There's nothing that I can tell anybody to do that will get their mind to clear. But I can help them see that when the mind clears, good stuff happens. And then people have to see that for themselves. Everybody's had that experience, though. Everybody's had it. Sometimes you have to help people see that they've had it.
Right.
And the other thing is that sometimes it happens out of a scrambled mind. It's like the mind goes, I don't know, some people are old enough to remember pinball machines. But you know, your mind goes tilt sometimes when it gets too scrambled, and like the mind just shuts down. Everything shuts down at that point and clears in a second, and all of a sudden we can get an insight that way. But it's still a clear mind. It's just that I wouldn't recommend that approach. So it happens sometimes.
Do you think that tilt mechanism is sort of a last-ditch effort of wisdom trying to get our attention?
It might be. I don't know. It's just that it's almost like what happens is, like, the logic that you've used to keep yourself inadvertently stuck doesn't hold any water anymore. You know, it's wait a minute, I can't keep hitting myself this way anymore. It's like,
yeah, that's enough of that.
right.
Well, it sort of reminds me of like a Zen master walking behind the students and sees one starting to drift and whacks them with a stick to jolt them back into reality, or not back into reality, but back into, I guess, meditation. Do we have any other questions while we've got Jack here? I'm looking for the components. Can anyone help me out with that? The 4 components?
You don't have them memorized, Michael? I just told you what they were.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know that I have them circled. Dominic, you have them memorized? Dominic's pretty good at that.
They're not memorized, but they're highlighted.
Oh, hold on. Do you have them?
It's just like, you know what it is? It's pure logic. It just makes total sense. If we're going to be helping people with their health, we have to be in ours.
Yeah.
If people's minds are cluttered, that mind has to loosen its grip. If you know, we need to listen really, really deeply to see what's beyond their words, to what's really going on. And we have to meet people where they're at.
How do you so this is a personal question here from my little bit of coaching experience, but how can we differentiate between cluing in beyond their words and thinking we know what to say? I'm not sure if I'm articulating that correctly enough.
All I can tell you is I stay in I don't know mode until I'm hit with something. So it's like, I don't know. I'm not saying that to myself, but it's true. I don't know. I really don't know. And I might throw out a question. I might throw out a comment, see if they take hold. If not, I go back into I don't know mode. And then all of a sudden, boom, I know. And that's when I will speak. And I won't, except for, like, you know, what I would normally do in a conversation. I'm not going to do anything that interferes with my listening. Everything that I'm throwing out is for the purpose of my listening deeper. And then something goes, boop. I hear something, and I'll put it out there. Like the other day, I was doing a coaching session with somebody, and this guy was really messed up in his mind. And all of a sudden, like, I just didn't know where to go to him. You go with him. I don't know. I know. And all of a sudden it hit me. He thinks he's broken.
Right.
And so I said that, and he got really, like, he knew it was right. But you know, I never could have gotten away with saying that until I heard it.
So when it comes from your truth or from love or from service, there's just a felt difference between when it's coming from the ego or from your intellect.
Yes, a felt difference is a good way to put it. And, you know, we can learn so much about coaching by really seeing what it was that affected those people that I interviewed in that book. What affected them? And it's that same kind of thing, not the specifics, that affects everybody.
Right.
Because you know, this is universal stuff. This is not personal to any one of us. It's universal. That's what counts.
Is there one? So first off, do we have any other questions quickly? Otherwise, I have a
Jesse
question.
Lynn has another one.
Yeah, I do.
Jesse,
Can't
go.
keep her down.
Yeah. Awesome. Go, Jesse.
Just one more thing that struck me when I was reading it was when you, again, it was that Khalil, I think it was around the Khalil conversation, where you said that there's a grain of truth in what the other person is saying.
Mm-hmm. I learned that from George Pransky.
So
It's like there's always a grain of truth in that. There's always something that makes perfect sense to that other person, or they wouldn't be having that thought. And if we can listen for what that grain of truth is for them, even if like it's a totally opposing side, if we can put ourselves out of the picture enough to hear what it is that's important to them, that opens up the possibility of a new conversation that we couldn't have before.
okay, that makes sense. Because when I first read it, when I went on to read that, it was more like that. But the first one I was reading that, I was like, I wasn't sure. So thank you.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, awesome, Jesse. Thank you. Jack, was there, so sort of a twofer. Is there a case study? Is there one of those people or one of those stories that really stands out to you?
All of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
guess that's why they're in the book, right?
They're all very special. I mean, Miss Beverly is just about the most amazing person I've ever met. So I would have to say that she stands out to me most, just because, like, if you're in her presence, it's like these knives are coming out of her eyes. She just looks right through you. She cuts right through. And you know, she's helped so many people with her presence. She's just about the most powerful person I've ever met.
For people that haven't read the book, Jack, can you expand on her just a little bit? Or your record?
Beverly Wilson at the time was before I met her, she was a heroin addict, and she was a drug pusher, and she was always a very powerful person, sometimes in not very constructive ways. So once she heard something in the principles that shifted her, she became the most powerful person I knew, that she could work with anybody. Kathy Casey says that she can go into the prisons and these big tough guys would be afraid of her.
Yeah.
And that's true.
So do you think her coming to the principles amplified her?
Well, as she says, I mean, she was like totally into Narcotics Anonymous.
Yeah, right.
And was like, one of the key speakers for them already, but she was not happy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for a lot of people who, are alcoholics too and get into AA. These are wonderful organizations that help people kick alcohol and drugs, and yet they're not necessarily living a happy life.
Right.
So when Beverly saw how her own thinking was getting in the way of her living a happy life, and when she saw that she was connected to this essence of herself that, in a sense, is a happy life automatically,
Right.
It lifted her, and she went to new heights. And you could pretty much say that about everybody I interviewed in the book.
I was curious, your inclusion of Judith and Elsie.
Yeah. Well, the interviews came from a book I had written before called Prevention from the Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing prevention work.
Oh, I see. Right.
And so Elsie had probably done, she apprenticed herself with Roger Mills and probably did more community work than most people. And Judy was trying to make the change in University of West Virginia.
Right.
And that's why I included them in the book. It wasn't because of their experience in low-income communities or something like that.
Right.
I mean, with themselves. So that it's just happened to be that way.
How it all works out. Very cool. We've got 4 minutes, I guess. Are there any last questions? I'd really like to, we've got time for another question if anyone has one. But I also, Jack, if you're keen or if you'd like to, I'd love to give you an opportunity to take a moment and just talk about the 10-month mentorship course, if you'd like. So do we have another question for Jack? Don't be shy.
I love questions.
Yeah. Kent?
Not Jesse Lynn again. Not
Okay.
Dominic again.
Way to go, Jesse.
Yeah, I beat Dominic. There we go.
Yeah, you did. Okay. You're
One
on.
quick question. When is your book on deep listening coming out?
What a good question.
I don't think that I can say in writing what needs to be said about deep listening because it has to be experienced. And like in all my trainings, I help people get into an experience of deep listening. In fact, many experiences of deep listening. Yeah. Actually, this is a good segue into what Michael was asking me. Did you do that?
You're welcome.
We didn't even talk about this, did we?
There's something about being in the experience. And the idea for the mentorship thing came up because I'm really going to be retiring.
Really?
Except for when people invite me to places that are on my bucket list.
There we go.
and so the thought occurred to me So am I just going to take my whatever expertise I have, such as it is, from my bumping into things along the way, what I've learned from Sid, what I learned from Roger Mills, and just kind of like ride off into the sunset? Or am I going to have a last gasp in helping people with whatever it is that I know? And that's where the mentorship idea arose from. And so what I mean by mentorship is, so everybody's got their own way of either putting the 3 principles out to the world or wanting to do that. And whatever experience I have, people can bring me stuff that they're running into that may be difficulties for them. And, we can deal with that. And, I can help with, each one of those 4 components is really an art.
Which I still haven't found.
You don't need to, Michael.
Yeah, no, I know.
They're in you anyway.
Yeah.
And like, what do each one of them really mean in a way that would be really helpful for whether people are coaches, whether they're trainers, whether they're educators, whatever they call themselves. So that's where the whole idea came up, and we're going to do a combination of individual stuff and group stuff. And hopefully it will work out in the way that I envision it.
I hope so as well. I can speak from personal experience, having been to Spain a couple of times on Jack's 5-day retreats, that they're pretty cool. They're pretty cool. I know that we're out of time, unfortunately. The information for the mentorship is at healthrealizations.com. Jack, is that correct?
You not Health Realizations.
Oh,
it's well, actually, officially, it's Iinsight-Understanding.com.
Oh, well, there you go.
So that's where you can find it, I believe.
All right. Well, we're at the top of our hour. Jack, I want to say thank you so much. Jack was, I keep telling people this. I don't know if I've told Jack this, but he's the guy who, post my experience in 2015, Jack was the guy who made it real for me with a conversation that he may or may not remember. It doesn't even matter. But what drew me to Jack was that I got on this call with him and I was just scrambled eggs and I was rambling like an idiot. And Jack stopped and said, "Okay, Michael, what is this about?" And it was in that stopping that aligned me to what I wanted to say. And what he said to me was that there was innocence in what I was searching for and innocence in me. And I don't need to go into any detail about that, but it just cut to the chase. So if you have an opportunity to work with Jack ever one-on-one or in a group, bloody well take it before he retires. So, if there are no other thoughts, I'll unmute everyone and we could say goodbye. And Jack, thank you so much for this.
You're entirely welcome, and thanks everybody for reading the book.
Yeah, hold on. I'm trying to unmute everyone, but
it's working.
We got everyone.
Thank you,
All right,
Jack.
thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Jack, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
And,
Thank you.
oh, wait, hold on. I should say the recording will go up on the Facebook page of the 3 Principles Book Club and Round Table. So check it out. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Bye again.
Thank you.
Thanks again,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.